Hello, I'm Alicia Davis,
And I'm Stacy Watson.
and we are partners and coaches at Transformative Leadership Strategies. And today we have a very special guest with us, don't we, Stace?
We do. We're welcoming Mikyle-Vaughn to our little conversation today. And we were inspired by Mikyle, which I can share a little bit about in a moment. But Mikyle, would you just like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I am an executive director of a childcare agency in New Haven and East Haven, where I have the absolute fortune to lead an agency with 120 employees and 500 children. And we impact lives that sometimes we don't get to see in the 5 years that they're here. They go on to make a difference in the world. And I have the fortunate blessing to be here and help them from behind the scenes.
Wow. Well, that's just so inspirational. And so much of the work we do at TLS is with organizations and leaders like yourself that are really in their communities, just making real difference every day. And we just stand in awe of all that you do and that your team does. So Alicia, we are here today with Mikyle because you and I have had a lot of conversations internally together, as well as with leaders around this idea of returning, right?
Right. And I think when we were talking, I think Mikyle was the inspiration, I think really like that inspiration that planted that seed of, oh, maybe we really need to potentially pull some resources together, because this whole process of returning, whether it's returning back to work, whether it's returning, whether it's about, families and kids returning back to school, whether it's, we were just having a conversation about returning to vacationing or returning back to the grocery store, and what does that look like and seem like, and there it's just so complex. And I think, Stace, Mikyle was joined us in one of our webinars, and you were very inspired by her just thoughtfulness and just insight around that topic, right?
Yes, well, Mikyle, and I know I said this to you, one of the things that really touched me in the comments that you were sharing was how you were able to really talk from the perspective of being, a mom, of being a partner, spouse, of being a leader of an organization, and how complex all of those roles are when we're talking about this idea of returning. And I would just be really interested to hear just your thoughts today, because as we know, these are ever evolving conversations. Just as you think about what does it mean to quote unquote return, what are some thoughts that you're having about that from as many of those perspectives as you'd like to touch on?
So that's such a great question, because when I think about returning, and I think you mentioned this, many of us want to get back to some sense of normalcy, right? It's been 18 months,
Yes.
maybe a little bit longer for some people. And we just want, change is hard for the little and for the older. And so we all want to get back to that. And I think for me, what I have somewhat resigned myself to is trying to not control that, like how it happens, right? I am a type A. And when you're a mom of 3 kids and you run an agency, everyone's looking for you to control things, right? To put it all into its box. And so I think I first struggled personally with being able to say, it's okay, normal is going to look different. And even understanding that gave me some anxiety, with my own personality. It was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what tomorrow is going to hold. But I'm always mindful of those around me. And so I will do things to get some of that anxious energy out, but then resign myself to the fact of change is inevitable. And I think that's where this pandemic has really, we've journeyed with it. Every day is a different day. And I'm grateful for the things and I focus on the things that are in the moment, able to give me the joy, the greatest joys of life. And I teach my kids that. So maybe we can't take the big trips that we want to right now, but you know what? We can do something small. And so we try to change the course of what that would look like and give ourselves some new ideas. In the business, it's really hard in a nonprofit to be as creative as you want because it all costs. But we come together and we think about, well, instead of graduation being in a room filled with mass people, how about doing a drive-through? So we have these think tanks where we think outside, like what do we need to do it? And then we tailor it down to what we can afford to. But I think that's really, for me, going through this, is letting go of these things that I can't control. I get frustrated. I get sad. There are some things, my little guy turned 5, and it was, in the backyard with his brother and sister and his mom and dad, and not the big 5-year-old birthday parties I did for my bigger kids years ago. I wanted to renew my vows this year. I've been married for 15 years and we didn't want to have that crowd. So I had to let go of some of those things. But again, I think realizing that in all of this, we still have some brightness to it. There's still some optimism. There's still, I'm healthy. My family is healthy. I have relatives who've had COVID and recovered. So trying to focus on those positives and not rushing back to normal, because I don't think it's there anymore. Right. So I think trying to get to something that is no longer there is going to be frustrating anyway. So we just take one day at a time and use our emotions to feel when it is sad or frustrating and talk about it.
It's just so profound, Mikyle. I mean, we talk a lot about this idea of going back to, like, there is no going back, right? Like, part of what we talk about, like in some of our resiliency workshops, is just, there's only moving forward, right? There's only defining what is the next aspect of myself as a mom, as a leader, as just a person in the world. Like, what is it that I want to be, and who do I want to be right now with whatever is changing? And you're absolutely right. Like, that uncertainty can be incredibly anxiety producing, and at the same time can also be incredibly, we're resilient human beings, right? So lots of innovation and creativity comes from that when we give ourselves that time to have that full expression of feeling. Right.
That's that space, right? To not deny it, to be okay and verbalize, I'm sad right now that I don't get to see my grandmother as much as I would like to, right? So, and then taking that emotion and then doing something to help me deal with it, right? Even my children, and the 5-year-old is young. It's hard for him to understand, whereas the 14-year-old may get it a little bit more. But a lot of, her experience in the world has shifted. Why can't I do that anymore? Why can't I go to birthday parties? All those things that we have said as a family, we're going to just pause for a minute, putting it into the space and not just saying, get over it. No, tell us why you're sad. Let's talk about the emotion and let's think of something else to do. So that creativity, I love that innovation that comes from it. And letting ourselves, be in the space of allowing each other, if you will, to be sad. There are some days I'm fine and my husband's not. Or there are days we come to work and my employees are very heavy on the emotion and I'm fine. And so, like, this is the space, have this space, let it be here, because I also think that some of the side effects of the pandemic will be us trying to, like, plow through and get through and be strong and not remembering that we are human. So we're resilient, but with that resilience comes the fact that we can heal. We have the time to heal, to be strong again, right? And not just everlasting strong.
Right.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that. And as we just sort of begin our wrap up here, I was just curious what thoughts you might have from a leader's perspective around supporting the team. And I know, as we were just doing a little prep before our conversation today, you were talking about an article that you had read around Simone Biles and just the inspiration you sort of received from that. And I wondered if you might share that with our viewers.
Sure. So I am not someone who watches Olympics faithfully, but, as with anyone else, saw the story of Simone Biles and really kind of just sat back and thought to myself, as with anyone else, she's having a mental health, maybe not a crisis, but an episode like many of us have had in this pandemic. And then I read an article that really talked about what she did in stepping down is really the epitome of what leadership is. And we don't think about that because we often associate leadership with winning, right? We we associate it with, like, achievement. And we don't often think about a leader as being someone to say to those around them, you know what, I need to take care of myself in order to achieve. Like that is the achievement for me, to survive mentally, not just physically. And to take a step back from what we perceive as winning and win in a different way. And I love that idea, because as a leader of an organization, who's federally regulated, state funded, there are all of these compliance issues that sit on top of us. And I have said similarly, not even knowing, I was channeling my Simone Biles of, we are doing great work. Just right now, we may not be at the top of our game, but we're meeting our mission. We're meeting our vision. We're working towards that. And so we miss out on some fantastic opportunities. But if we need to take a week off or close the program when no one else is closing, just to have everybody take a breath, right? Just to encourage, employee assistance programs or mental health services, fighting for those things to make sure that we are focusing on that winning, that personal individual winning, just as much as we're focusing on that collective achievement that we so hard, strive for, but sometimes have to say, not right now. I need to heal and I need to win in order to be a great leader and model for those around me.
I'm giving you a huge heart for that, Mikyle, because it is so in alignment with so much of the work that Stacy and I do with leaders all the way down to direct care providers, right? Like there needs to be that time of self-care, of self-reflection, of pausing, of doing whatever you need to do to regenerate, or at least have some sense of a little bit of filling up, even if it's just a little bit, to keep going, right? And some days are easier to do that than others. And I think just what you're saying is just really is so reflective, I think, of so many of the leaders that we support and so many of the teams that are out there. And just that, it just seems like such a healthy approach. And I'm just so grateful that you were able and willing to join us today to just share some of these thoughts with us and with our folks that are watching.
Thank you for the invitation. Thank you so much. You're doing wonderful, wonderful work that we have to remember. In order to be effective at leading, we need to take time for self-care. So thank you for creating these spaces for leaders to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mikyle. We'll look forward to our ongoing conversations. And thank you for being our inaugural, sort of extra person in our conversation. So we're very excited about that. Thank you for being our guest.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you everyone for watching. And if you have any questions, you can always email us info@tlstransforms.com. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.